Lords and ladies of the Duchy, welcome to episode 6 of Duke's D&D Debauchery as we continue to recount the tale of our heroes on the world of Renkaat and the Conduit. Where we last left our heroes, the party had split. Milo, Dox, and Gorstag had found their way to Anastasia's School for the Blind, and Von Beck and Roderick had found their way to the public library originally, and then eventually to the academy, where they had met with Clerk Rufo and Clerk Logan and had figured out that, hey, there hasn't been a vote for a king in the last 160 years or so, and things are not necessarily going very well. We can't trust the clerks. Whereas Milo, Dox, and Gorstag met with Derek, the helper at Anastasia's School for the Blind, as well as met with the headmaster, who goes by no other name, and had found their way into Anastasia's School for the Blind basement. As Milo, Dox, and Gorstag proceed through the doors into the basement, as they start to move through the hallway, the doors close behind them, and the thick iron banding on the back sides of the doors is covered in arcane writing that none of them happen to understand. Arcane runes, and the doors seem to shut firmly behind them. As they continue to move forward for 150 feet or so, they eventually come to a door that's in front of them, and Gorstag checks for traps. No traps. It's perfectly fine for them to open, and they open into a 80 by 80 room or so. It's dark at first, and there's kind of like a 5-foot long little entryway past this door, but there, as far as they can see, there's nothing in there. They illuminate a torch. They illuminate one of Gorstag's arrows. They take like some oil from his lantern and like a rag, and they light the arrow, and they shoot it to the far side of the room. And as they shoot this arrow to the far side of the room, what they're able to make out along the walls is that same mark that was on just above the headmaster's collarbone, this 3 writhing snakes in a circle. And as the arrow hits the far end of the wall, the ceiling, there's a 10 by 10 section of the ceiling that drops down, and there are these piles of cloth, dark cloth, that seem to be sitting there. As Milo starts to slightly venture into the room, the claws animate and are filled with what appears to be shadow, as Milo quickly leaves the room and closes the door. The party is, or at least Milo, Dox, and Gorstag are like, well, what do we do? Well, nowhere else to go but forward, it seems. So they open the door again, and they start to walk in, and these 6 forms that are shadow-filled cloth have kind of started to move around this 10 by 10 section. And as Milo basically introduces himself, speaks for the first time, all 6 of them that had kind of been looking in whatever direction, nowhere in particular, all of them look to him. And then he hears in his mind, "Are you here for the trial?" To which he responds, "Yes." And they respond, "Then let the trial begin." And all 6 of them rush forward as Milo is ahead of both Dox and Gorstag, and they immediately run up to him, and that begins initiative. So Gorstag is able to go first, and he knocks and looses an arrow that goes straight through one of these shadow creatures. And I probably did not do a good enough job as a DM of saying, hey, you actually dealt damage to this creature, because all that I said was, hey, you loose the arrow, it hits, it goes through the... You basically, you aim for the head, it goes through the head, and then you hear it clatter on the far side. Then they proceed to immediately down Milo, and Dox doesn't know what to do because she's now next in the fray, and it isn't until it comes around to Gorstag's turn, the next round, where he uses a tool that I give to my parties, which is basically a get out of jail free card for when you have gotten into a situation that you should not be in, and he uses the coin given to them by Dawn. And so this takes us all the way back to our first session, where as part of the deal, what Dawn gave each of the individuals in the party was a coin. It is a copper coin with iron inlay of an iron boot on one side, and on the other side is a hammer and anvil, also iron on a copper coin. And he tells them, when you really need it, just a drop of blood will do you. And so Gorstag takes one of his arrows, pricks his finger, and puts a drop of blood onto the coin. This brings Dawn into the situation, and Dawn quickly dispatches all 6 of these cloth shadow forms, and then kind of like jumps back behind them and is looking around and basically says, I shouldn't be here. And at what Dox and Gorstag see is this shadow rushing forth from where they had originally come, and it looks like it's attempting to like grasp out and envelop Dawn, but then Dawn disappears, and then the shadow recedes. Dox is the subclass of Mystic that she's playing is Immortal, and so she is able to revive Milo in this situation, and Milo, Dox, and Gorstag get out of there, basically. And they get to the doors, and they're like, oh my goodness, like, are we even going to be able to open the doors or whatever? So Milo wild shapes into a gorilla, pulls the doors, and the doors are just, they open, and they make their way out, causing a bit of ruckus on the way, much to Derek's displeasure, and that Headmaster's like calling back after them like, hey, like, you guys are already done? And they're like, nope, we're not done. We need our friends. We'll be back. And the Headmaster's like, oh, okay, well, hurry back. You know, I'm still translating these books up here. And the party, Milo, Gorstag, and Dox are just like, what in the world just happened? That was not a very good situation for us to have been in. And they basically are on their way back towards like where they knew that Von Beck and Roderick were going, which was the public library over in the courts on the other side of the city. And that brings us to what is going on with Roderick and Von Beck. Unfortunately, the player who plays Roderick was unable to make this session, and so I had to do a little bit of inventive stuff. So as Von Beck leaves the academy, he's like basically is turning to try and tell something to Roderick now that they're outside of the doors, and Roderick just isn't there. And Von Beck, thinking back, is like, oh, yeah, like, the last that I saw him, we were just outside the classroom making our way to leave, and then I turned down into the main corridor, and then I hadn't seen him since, and I hadn't heard his footfalls. So that is, Von Beck is now very confused and a little scared because he is now alone. What in the world just happened to Roderick? But we need to tell the rest of the party what's going on. So he starts to make his way back towards where he'd have a rough understanding of where the party was going, to Alexander's Burrow. And the party ends up meeting up, and after the 4 of them get together, they're kind of like right outside like Lumott's shop and Tokren's Burrow, that inn that they were in, or that tavern that all of this started at. And he like Dawn comes out of an alleyway and is like, hey, come with me. And as he pulls them all into the alleyway, he activates a ring that's on his finger, and a doorway opens, and he leads all of these individuals into a door out of nowhere into a well-furnished home. He explains a little bit of, I wasn't expecting guests. Also, we have your friend. He's upstairs being tended to by Dea, but since we have guests, let me go and grab some food, and then he calls Dea Saul down. The party starts to interact with Dea Saul, and Gorstag is basically going to town trying to get drunk because he is basically super frightened by what he just experienced, because he was like, I put an arrow right through this thing's head and it did nothing. And Gorstag has never been in a situation where it's like, hey, I shoot an arrow, it hits something, it deals damage, and the arrow stays there. And I know that I receive feedback that, hey, damage has been done. So Gorstag is really put out by this, but they talk to Dea for a little bit, and they get some of the history of between Dawn and Dea, and a little bit about what it is that is the bigger picture for Dawn. And a lot of it happens to kind of be about they're trying to do good in the world. They're fighting an exceptionally large evil, and they can't be everywhere all at once, and so they have to find individuals, such as the members of this party, to try and combat the evil that they unfortunately don't have the time to deal with. And Dea is kind of in this situation where she's trying to reassure these individuals that, look, whatever that you experience that kind of like puts you on edge, if Dawn picks you, then obviously you're capable of dealing with it. One of the other small lore things that happens with Dea is that she gives them Gorstag is completely sloshed by this point, and Von Beck is well on his way as well. And Dea gives them Songan tea. And so Songans are a race of people from another world inside the conduit known as Alava Kivi, and this tea has very special properties where it's basically it contains some of this spice that's collected and harvested in the desert that they live in, and it kind of has like rejuvenating properties. So it as they drink the tea, they all sober up a little bit, and then Dawn eventually returns. A couple of other things happen here kind of at the beginning as the party is trying to figure out what it is that they need to do. Von Beck explains what they learned at the academy, and Docs, Gorstag, and Milo explain to Von Beck what they learned going to Anastasia School for the Blind. Now, Dawn basically detects that Gorstag is having a very, very hard time with what it is that he saw. And so he offers to take him under his care for a little bit, and through kind of a one-on-one mental bond, this is the first time that the party, apart from seeing Dawn literally an hour or two earlier just apparate out of nowhere, immediately deal with whatever problem they had, and then disappear, this is their a little bit more of insight into what it is that Dawn is capable of doing. And so Dawn works through mentally as he expands his mind into Gorstag, and they continue to replay that same scenario of what Gorstag did, where he knocked the arrow, he draws it to his cheek, he releases, he sees the arrow flying, and he sees it impact into what should be the head of this creature and then fly through. And then they hone in on just that moment, and at the very, very edge of Gorstag's sensory abilities, there is the very slightest hint of a scream. Gorstag had damaged the creature, and this allows Gorstag to be able to move past this irrational fear of these creatures moving forward. Milo attends to Roderick, who is out of his armor and is laying in a bed and is kind of in a coma-like state. And he talks to Dea, who had earlier revealed the fact that she is an archdruid of a a circle and a coven, but not on this world, on the world where she was born and where she first met Dawn, a world known as Lade. And this immediately, the way that Milo responds is with immediate respect and reverence to this creature who is an archdruid and is obviously exceptionally powerful. She is half-elf in form. She's a little less than 5.5 feet tall. She has waist-length, nut-brown hair. She has these almost emerald green eyes, but not the same type of unsettling gemstone-style eyes that Derek has, but instead it's almost as if her eyes have been overtaken by natural magics. And she also has branches, basically like tree branches, growing out of her temples, and all of that kind of denotes her status as being a druid for a very, very long time, and being a very powerful one at that. And Milo is basically goes up to her and is like, I need to learn how to better protect myself and protect others should they take damage. And so through that, Milo is able to learn the Cure Wounds spell through some time spent with Dea. Eventually, it's kind of time for the party to rest, to recuperate from the injuries that they sustained, and to basically try and wait for Roderick to wake up. And so as they go to bed that evening, they each have dreams. And each of these dreams, it's like they're looking through someone else's eyes. And as they are looking through this individual's eyes, they see, each one of them sees someone who's important to them. So for Milo, it's the archdruid of the circle that he grew up in the Kingswood. And then from his point of view, he looks over and he sees a younger version of himself. And then there's, as it pans back to the archdruid of the circle, the hands reach out, and as he looks down and sees kind of in his peripheral, it's a human hand in a green cloak, very reminiscent of Dawn's. And each of the party members go through the same kind of iteration of this before they're tugged into these views and feelings of, oh goodness, there is something very, very bad happening. There's a smell of smoke and a burning house and heavy breathing, and their pulse is erratic and pumping, and the house that they've always known is burned down, and there's 2 corpses charred, and they're angry, they're furious, they are in a rage. And then they feel the warmth of the sun crest their cheek as they unsheath their sword and fly into the air, into the depths, through the air into the depths of a cave, and they feel as their sword starts to rend through scales. They feel their skin burn with flames, be shocked by electricity, melt away from acid, but they continue to recover, and they continue to move forward and to slash until eventually they find themselves on their knees in a well-illuminated area. It's beautiful, ornate floors. There's sourceless light around them, and as they look up, they see a platinum dragon who says, "It is time for the killing to end." And around this platinum dragon is a court of golden dragons. And as all of this happens, they wake up and they hear as Dea is running down the hallway, Dawn! and they all get up out of their rooms and follow Dea as Dawn is now floating off of what is essentially a wooden bench that he uses as a bed. He's 3 or 4 feet above, just floating, and his eyes are wide open and are glowing white, and there's white mist almost emanating from his eyes, and they look atop his forehead and they see almost as if an eye is tattooed in the center of his forehead, but the iris of the eye is, it's like a rainbow of colors is spinning endlessly, and Dea reaches up and tries to pull him down, but the house itself is starting to shake, and all of the paintings and the little trinkets that are around the room begin to shake, and things start to fly, and they feel as gravity starts to ease on their bodies as they begin to flow up, before eventually Dea is able to calm Dawn and bring him back down onto his bed, as she basically explains to the party, who's exceptionally concerned at this point, that Dawn, at the end of the day, is breaking. He is under so much stress from what it is that they are trying to accomplish, from the evil that they are trying to prevent from overtaking the world, that he's running himself ragged. And because of that situation that they saw in their dreams, as they felt their sword break through and rend scales, that entire situation, basically that uncontrollable rage that still lives within Dawn, when he gets into combat, sometimes he's not able to bring himself back down, and there are almost echoes of that rage that he experienced that he's still fighting through, and Dea is very concerned. All that they're trying to do is stop this evil before Dawn is not able to continue. And the party all says kind of like their parting piece, but as Dox goes forward and lays her hands on Dawn's head and tries to comfort him with her own mystic powers, Dawn's eyes open and they're flaring white again, and he reaches up and he touches her head and he says, "You must know," as Dox is taken to Dawn's point of view of the night that the fire ravaged the caravan of her family. And what she sees is, as the fire is raging, Dawn moves in and extinguishes as much of the flame as he can, and he's not able to save everyone, but he saves about half or so of the individuals. And there's a conversation that happens with an individual, and it's hard to recognize them as first because of all the soot that's on their face, but it's Dox's father. And he's exceptionally concerned. Where is Dox? Where is she? Where is my daughter? And Dawn says, "I do not know, but she is not amongst the dead." And the very ending scene that we see from Dawn's point of view is Dox's mother come and comfort her weeping father. That really shakes Dox, but at the end of that, Dawn, once again, his eyes close and stop glowing, and his arm falls back down to his side, and he is once again asleep. Dox is going to have to take some time to try and reconcile with that, but she ends up leaving the room, and the very last individual who is in the room is Gorstag, who's sitting at the chair at the far end of the room, and he makes a very soft comment to himself, talking about, "May truth guide your way." And as he kind of sees out of his peripherals, he sees Dea tense, and he raises his voice, "Is there a problem?" And Dea basically turns on him, and her eyes are glowing green. she explains that there's not necessarily a problem, but when people mention truth as if it's a deity, basically she has not had a very good experience with any of that. And basically, Gorstag is like, okay, I'm going to try and de-escalate the situation. And he basically is like, okay, I just want Dawn to be okay, but I'm going to leave now. And Dea says basically, yeah, I think that's for the best that you leave this room. So some of the stuff that goes on with Gorstag and his relation with Truth. Truth is the deity of the changelings. It is who Hlifar basically has all of the changelings worship in some way or another, but it's not necessarily an active religion in the sense that there is no temple to Truth. It's more a way of living, is kind of the way that it's best experienced. But Gorstag and knows that talking about Truth is not something really that the rest of the world does. The world is, at least on Renkaat that he's experienced, doesn't know Truth, and Hlifar is okay with that. Everyone knows Truth in their own way, but obviously Gorstag, having slipped for the first time in discussing his deity, finally I think it understands why it is that Hlifar doesn't want them talking about Truth in public. There is some very bad connotation that comes with it, and so that's kind of the situation that Gorstag kind of leaves with that, and that is the end of the 6th session. So from a DM's point of view, this session obviously had to run some loops around the fact that Roderick wasn't able to be there to play, but the ability for the party to recognize that they were in a very, very bad situation very, very early, before one of them actually died, and using their get-out-of-jail-free card, that's kind of why I give it to players. It's not something that I intend for them to use very often, but it's something in their back pocket of, oh, okay, we got into something that we shouldn't deal with yet. Like, let's kind of get a reset. And so this is their first experience with that. And it was, in my opinion, the correct choice. The 3, Gorstag, Dox, and Milo, were not capable of dealing with the encounter because the encounter was built for all 5 of them. And that is something that I, as a DM, am kind of hardlined on, is that I design encounters for who I expect to be there, and I expect all 5 players basically to go into this area beneath Anastasia School for the Blind. This is basically your main story quest. All of you need to be there, and going in there without your half tank in the Paladin and your full tank in the Fighter, it was not a good situation for them. Some of the lore opportunities that were here, I was very happy with as well. Being able to introduce Dea Sol, who is a character from the first campaign that I ran in the Conduit, was happy to be able to bring her back and continue kind of the relationship that she and Dawn have. Being able to show the fact that Dawn struggles with things. He is not a perfect individual as much as he appears to be on the outside and always having the answers and always having a plan. There are things that he's struggling with and dealing with, and he still has room to grow, even though he's kind of, at least to these characters that we're currently viewing, he is well far and above their capabilities. And at the end of the day, he kind of the understanding that Dawn can't be everywhere. There are other people who have to help deal with the problems that the Conduit is going through. So, and then some of the small stuff talking about like Song and Tea and being able to kind of show kind of the living conditions that Dawn and Dea deal with as they're continuing their fight against Korik in the Conduit. A lot of that is kind of just nice for me as a DM to be able to do. Now, one of kind of the last things that gets discussed with Dea that I forgot to mention earlier was she mentions that one of their old friends is in town should they need them. If they find that their path takes them out of the city and they need to sail somewhere, that one of their old friends is in town, and he's currently chartering a ship known as the Antelope. So if you are looking for travel somewhere, that's someone that could probably get you where you need to go. I just don't know what it's going to cost you. He's a man of money. And so that was just kind of, just a direct hint kind of to the party of, okay, like, when it is time for you to leave town, basically, if you choose to leave via sailing, this is kind of your best opportunity. And that was just kind of a small little thing that got dropped, and kind of the fondness of Dea to that individual is something that I don't think that I hit exactly correctly, but eventually gets explained later. So I hope that you've enjoyed episode 6 of Duke's D&D Debauchery as we continue to follow the tale of our heroes on the world of Renkaat in the Conduit. And I hope that you'll come back for the next episode when it gets uploaded.